without further ado, everyone, Jator Pierre, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Deep Sea Dive. How are you, Jator?
It's my favorite non-favorite question. It's such a challenging question to answer. I think for me the habitual I'm good or it's fine is doesn't really give spectrum to the breadth and width of what I'm feeling at any given moment, which has a tendency to be very wide. And if we were really to sit with that one question, that would be the podcast. It would be me here speaking feelings for about however long we're going to go. And so, I noticed there's a part of me that gets so triggered about that question. So in this moment, I'm curious about my trigger. I'm also, as we were kind of chatting about earlier, I feel some sense of apprehension, frustration, anger, some imagery of throwing my hands up or that emoji or this emoji. The world, my experience of the world right now weighs heavily on my heart and on my head. And I feel a lot of curiosity as well as heaviness as to what's to come. I think I have this weird feeling that this is just getting warmed up right now. And I wonder what's next, man.
It is, as we both mentioned earlier, a challenging time. And I really resonate with what you're saying about the curiosity about what is to come, because that's something I've been able to cultivate to a certain degree for myself, but I know a lot of people struggle with. For somebody who's so open and honest and so true to themselves, I'm kind of curious, literally, how curiosity comes up as a response for you to challenging times and events. Because I think for most people, if they're to hear that and they try to make that leap, that can be disingenuous to a certain degree, right? So maybe if you're open to it, sharing a little bit about how you've been able to navigate really feeling the truth and the breadth of what's going on, and still hang with curiosity.
Oh, what a great question. Well, in honesty, there is a part of me that has grown over the years that feels, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say 50% okay with being truly expressive of how I'm feeling emotionally in a moment, and maybe the breadth and depth of that. There's another 50% of that. And I noticed it actually immediately when we started to jump on and record and you asked me how I was feeling, and I started to give voice to some of that. There's another part of me that feels some sense of apprehension about sharing that, because there's another part that wants to control how that lands in people's ears, or how that lands in their hearts, or how that lands in their understanding. In a way, I want to feel a sense of control about their interpretation of my words. I'll give you an example. And I'll usually get myself in trouble, so we'll just continue down that path. I was on a CHEK faculty call a long time ago, and in my normal way. I share that I have many aspects of me that are occurring in any given moment. And I often don't hide when I have fear, when I have shame, when I have guilt, when I have depression, when I have anxiety. Now, these are all aspects of me. It's not a totality of me, but it's part of the experience that I'm having. And on a CHEK faculty call, I can kind of sound like a Debbie Downer. Let's just say that. and so after we get off the call, this is about 5 years ago, the CEO or COO, whatever those titles are, at the time called me and said, I wanted to check in with you, Jator. Are you okay? Like, do you need some help? Are you like really depressed? And so there is a, I'm going to say almost a backlash with being so expressive, especially in a society and around people who are not used to hearing the breadth and width of expression of feeling and emotion. And from my perspective, a society is a general theme in which we've been taught to parent others, and the way that we parent others often is by caretaking. Are you depressed? I'm here to fix you and make you okay, and you shouldn't feel that way, and let me move that feeling right away for you, because you should have this beautiful smile on your face at all times. And do I smile? Yeah. Do I crack up and have a beautiful time and joyous and excitement? Yeah, but going to the, in quotes, positive side or positive emotion is not challenging for me. That's easy. It's easy for me to give voice to those aspects. It's much more challenging for me to give voice to the aspects of myself that I don't want to acknowledge, or I'm afraid for other people to experience and then want to parent me about my experiences of life. And as far as I'm aware consciously, I don't want to be parented. I want to be heard. And I know that's never going to happen. Never's probably a stretch, but rarely going to happen. So I've grown the curiosity to continue to do that regardless of what the outcomes are going to be, because I'm actually curious. I wonder how it'll be received this time. I wonder if my projected story will end up being true, if my fear about the interpretation and then the parenting or the need to fix will come back. Will that be true? I don't know. And so curiosity has become this way for me to, this might sound fun, to play with myself. Because there's not a lot of other people in the sandbox. And so my curiousness allows me the space to continue to share as boldly and as honestly as I can in any given moment. Because if I didn't have the curiousness and maybe the innocence, then I would remain naive and hide. And I've done that. I'm 43 now. So I'd say there was a moment when I was 35 that I think this egg really cracked. And we were talking about insane or sane earlier. Maybe it cracked the insane aspects of me. But I was watching Discovery Channel, and I think it's called spelunking or something, where these people dive into these caves and shift around, and it could take 2 hours to go a meter or two. And I'm watching the show and I'm thinking, what the hell? My hands are sweating. I feel nauseous. I feel claustrophobic. And I thought in that moment, okay, what does this represent to me? What does this represent to me that these people are in these tight places? They don't know where they're going. It's super dark, constricted. They could get stuck. And then it hit me. A tremendous amount of tears and a tremendous amount of emotion that I realized in that moment that majority of my life I had been spelunking to fit into what I thought other people needed me to be. And that moment was when I started to, you know what? I'm going to start sharing even more of me and more of my experiences. And in a very weird way, that moment too, when I started to, I think, really show up as how I experience myself and let all of those aspects express, that's when my practice just took off. I was successful before, but now it just really, really took off. And I have no idea if I answered your question at all, but it felt good to say.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You answered many questions, which is what I love about our conversation. You know, you mentioned going 2 meters in 2 hours and spelunking for essentially other people's recognition and approval. And that's something that, you know, brings up a lot of fear for me as well of, you know, how can I be myself while still being loved? Because there's a deep part of me that needs that love and tender connection to feel safe. And you said your practice also exploded whenever, or at the point when you chose to start sharing more. And knowing you personally, there are many beautiful caveats to some of the things that I think you mentioned in terms of reception. Some people may say, oh man, it seems like you're depressed. Well, maybe it sounds like that to you. But to me, I'm in the presence of my truth. So this next question that was evoked from what you said is, what's it like to really live in your truth while being mindful of the way that you show up in your relationships, in your friendships, and how we, you know, also be mindful of those parts of self that still want to be loved, still want to be cared for, but are almost guided by the inner strength of truth, or the inner strength of your conviction to share.
You asked some really surface level questions, Savi.
It clearly wasn't deep enough. We can try again.
Oh, I love your questions, man. That's some good shit. Yeah. So for me, what I'd share is that I recognize in myself the same things that I heard you recognize in yourself. I have a need for love. I'm going to change the language a little bit. I have a need to be needed. I think love gets thrown around a lot. And I think for me, what that word means is beyond often human understanding, in the way that many of us use the word love is really meaning an emotional neediness, which is cool. And I just like to call it like I see it. So, yep, I'm emotionally needy too, Zavi. And I think I'd mirror back some of what you said too. It's scary for a part of me. It's scary to really share my truth around people that I feel a higher level of desire of their attention, that I feel a higher level of desire of their approval, that I feel a higher level desire of fitting into their value set. It's definitely there. It's definitely still there. And I will not deny that it's not there frequently. It is. It's frequent. It's an easy example, right? I'm on your podcast right now. I'd be lying to you if I didn't say there's a part of me that hopes I meet your needs. Or that hopes that people that listen to this get something out of it, and maybe I get a like or two. I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that that's true. And so I think what's happened over time, back to this kind of spelunking or this idea when I was 35, is hindsight is such a powerful teacher if we're allowing ourselves to learn from it. And so in hindsight, looking back when I was 35, what motivated that change was I thought, wait a second, this is, can I curse on here?
Always.
Fucking hilarious. This is fucking hilarious. Are you telling me that I've been contorting, manipulating, seducing, changing, dancing on eggshells, dancing at all times to get attention, to get what I think I want, and I still don't fucking get it? That was a powerful realization when I started to realize no matter what I do, 99% of the time, it doesn't turn out the way that I want it to anyway. I could name, which I won't, but I could name 3 or 4 long-term relationships in which I danced like nobody's business to present myself as the best boyfriend, the best lover, the best carer, the most developed, the most partnered, the less codependent, whatever way I needed to present myself. And it still ended in a way that I did not want it to end. And so then I started to sit back and I thought, well, that's interesting. There's aspects of me, and I'd say a lot of aspects of me, that are always searching for control. And because of that search for control, I'm typically acting out behaviors to elicit that sense of control. And yet, it doesn't turn out the way I want it to anyway. So at that time, I thought, well, this is where curiosity comes in. I got curious. I thought, well, hindsight says 35 years you've been doing that, Jator. In fact, you were contorting yourself in your mom's uterus 35 years. You've been doing that. You know basically where that leads and what's going to happen. But what is the path that you haven't traversed yet? What's the mountain that you haven't climbed? What's the spaces that you've been afraid to go? And so I found myself essentially at the bottom of 2 mountains and said, well, I've climbed that one. I don't know. 50 comes up for me right now. And this one, well, maybe 1, 0. And I thought, well, shit, I got nothing to lose. And then I just started to practice in that moment. Okay, I'm going to be honest, really honest. And I tend to have a part of me that likes to go to extremes. I'll go to one extreme. I'll go to the opposite extreme. This is a Buddha quote. And then I'll find my way to the center. I haven't found my way to the center on much, by the way, but there's still a dance. So this one, I went to this extreme place of really being honest, boldly honest, sharing things I don't want to share, speaking words I don't want to speak, being much more vibrantly expressive, and spreading that to have the experience of it. And what I found is it's no different. Shit doesn't turn out the way I want it to either. Here's the difference, though. It doesn't turn out differently. But, and that's a purposeful B-U-T in caps, but the experience is different. I don't feel as heavy. I don't feel as contorted. I don't have emotional eating binges. I don't have drug binges. I don't have alcohol binges. I don't have woman binges. I don't have all of the ways that I used to express that pain outwardly to deflect from it reduced. And so I'd say my life has become more graceful, or my experience of my life has become more graceful through representing myself at the detriment of many, 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 many friendships, relationships, partnerships, business relationships, etc. And that's been like this sifting, or cotton gin, what separates the seed from the cotton. It's been the sifting of that, and what I'm left with after that, and still through that, when I look at what's in my cotton or what's in my flour or whatever I've sifted, the people that are in my life are fully accepting of all my craziness and all my weirdness, and enjoy it and celebrate it and ask it and say, please don't stop being you, Jator. Even if that means that we're not in a relationship, or even if that means we go our separate ways, or even if, whatever the if is, even if there's a loss of love, emotional attachment. As an example to this story, which I'll share, it's really purposeful for me, because for me, it was one of the greatest moments of love that I've experienced. And it's beyond that. That word doesn't, it's like I'm trying to house this grand experience in this word called love that people use for emotional attachment. So it doesn't really work. So let's just say that word. But my ex-girlfriend, when we had our separation conversation, I said to her that in our relationship, she gave me this card. The card said, I love you for real. I love you for real. And I said, you gave me this card, and now we're breaking up, going our separate way, and you're breaking up with me, which I feel a sense of shame actually saying that out loud. So it's another reason why I say it, to dissolve the shame that I carry about it, so I don't have to keep secrets that hold me back. Okay. So I said, you gave me this card, and it said, I love you for real. And in this moment, you're breaking up with me, what I represent to you. In this moment, that card becomes real. You love yourself. You honor yourself. You care for yourself enough to step out of something that you're not enjoying, rather than being with me out of some level of obligation, expectation, or spelunking yourself. I can't think of a greater expression of what that word means to me than a person being true to themselves in my presence, even if that means I feel pain about it.
Wow. First of all, thank you for sharing all that. That was vulnerable in my experience and represents a deep degree of tremendous wisdom about interpersonal relationships, and more so about you. And that's a beautiful thing to me. You mentioned what it's like to know that somebody can go their separate way, and that's representative of love to you. And I think that's really, really interesting. And you also mentioned love as an idea of attachment. And as you express these vulnerable parts, I'm kind of curious, when you navigate some of these relationships, you said business, friendships, personal, and there's a sense of attachment that can be palpably felt. What's another way that you navigate some of those situations where you know there might be a degree of codependency between both parties, and something in you says, I know myself, so I know that. How does that subject get broached? And maybe for the listeners, what are some tools that you use in your communication to say, hey, this is how I'm feeling, and I just have to be brutally honest here?
Yeah. Something I learned along the way, I'll blame John McMullen for this, and I'll blame JP for this. I like to blame them for a lot of things. This way I don't have to take ownership of my own wisdom, make them responsible for it. Then I can feel ashamed about saying I'm wise. Shit. Who are you to say you're wise? I'm not fucking wise. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. Everyone knows I'm crazy at this point, so this is going to be awesome. Yeah, let's see. So, blame JP and John. Something I learned from watching both of them, at least in my the beginning of our friendships and our brotherhoods, is they speak in a way that is essentially, from the Bay Area, we'd say like putting you on blast. Like they speak, like I'm putting myself on blast, right? So here's my judgment, Zavi, ... Here's my projection, Zavi, ... Here's my opinionated opinion, Zavi, ... You and I banter in the background quite a bit, and I'll say, I'm parenting you now. Right. I'll call myself out, or I'm being arrogant now, or I'm being self-righteous now. The point of that, at least from my perspective, isn't for the other person to know. There's probably some thread in there that is helpful. The point for me, though, as a majority theme, is by saying that out loud, I'm hearing myself say it so I can become aware of what I'm doing. If you, some of us that are probably listening to this are coaches or practitioners, let's just say as a general theme, and those of us that aren't, my invitation to that crowd or those crowds is, if you can learn to be extremely observant of how, I'm going to go on a limb here and say 95% of people speak. 95% of people speak in habitual patterns. And those habitual patterns are expressive of subconscious programming and agenda that usually the speaker is unaware of. It's like there's a wise fish in a fishbowl, and there's two young fish, and young isn't really the right word. Let's just say unwise fish, because you can be very wise at a very young age, i.e. my homie who's on the other side of this lens. And so this wise fish swims up to the unwise fish and says, "How's the water today?" And they say, "What water are you talking about?" Because they're engulfed in it, they're absorbed in it. They don't even know that they're in water. And so because of this not knowing, awareness becomes an extremely powerful tool to realize what waters you're actually in. And so by me speaking these things outwardly, I'm judging right now, I'm parenting you right now, I'm being opinionated right now, I'm feeling self-righteous right now, and on. Essentially what I'm doing is telling myself, this is the water I'm in. This is the water I'm swimming in right now. Okay. I'm swimming in parenting. I'm swimming in rescuing. I'm swimming in being a victim. I'm swimming in being a punisher. I'm swimming in being a prostitute. I'm swimming in whatever it is. If I can give voice to it, it helps me reverberate it back so I can notice it. For me, the more I can notice it, then it's kind of Neo in the Matrix, right? When Neo gets killed at the end and he comes back to life. For me, what that part of the movie meant was he realized he was in the Matrix. He realized he was in the water. He realized what part of self he was in at that moment. And so by speaking this outwardly, I can help myself navigate the waters that I swim in, which then helps me be more mindful of those waters. And then I can reduce the amount that they need to be expressed. I'm also co-creating for me, just like in our relationship, for me, there's connection. There's connection in our relationship because we tend to be vulnerable with each other. And so through that vulnerability of expressing what's really going on in my heart, what's really going on in my feelings, what's really going on in my emotions, what's really going on in my sensations, you and I have co-created a deeper level of communication over time, which has also been built on the trust that you and I have created too, because we've had the experiences of sharing this type of stuff with each other. And wait a second, no one's shaming and blaming me. Wait a second, Jator's still my homie. Wait a second, Zavi's still my homie. Wait a second, we're still here. And then that starts to, for me, build more connection, less attachment. So the same thing with attachment then is, can I notice when I'm becoming attached? And I don't always notice it because I'm a fish in a bowl and I get lost sometimes. You know, when people talk about awareness and presence and say, so Jator, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how aware are you? I'm like, I don't know, 0.001. Like, are you kidding me right now? Barely aware.
Right.
I am a fish in a water bowl. And I'm in shock when people say, like, I'm so aware. Like, yeah, okay. The debate's still out on that one. Sounds like someone needs to put themselves up on pedestals. Okay. So then that's how I navigate that. And then let's just say then in an intimate partnership or relationship or ones where I have more emotional attachment, right? So let's say my mom, my dad, intimate partners in the sense of women. it gets more convoluted because the water, this is interesting, actually. I was going to say the water gets thicker. The water gets thinner. It's even harder to find my way because I'm essentially more blinded by my emotional attachments. I'm more blinded that I need love, or that I need to be loved, or I need to love someone. It becomes even a thinner illusion, which is harder to see. A thicker illusion is easier. It's more overt. The thinner it is, the more subtle, and the more refinement one must have, I would guess, to be able to palpably feel it, because it's like air now, right? Is it there? I can feel it. And so in those relationships, in blatant honesty, brother, I will not be in a relationship or partnership with a person who's unwilling to do coaching with a third party present. From the beginning, I'm talking about first or second date, and things are like, oh, this is cool. I'm dropping that right away. Are you willing to do work with a therapist or a coach together with me? Because I'm blind as fuck. And I'm guessing you are too. And I'd really like to take the blinders off in the beginning and see if it goes somewhere different. And then that starts to cultivate or farm a different way of interacting with each other, because we're starting it differently rather than starting it with our patterns, which are typically from our parents or our family of origin, or where we've been surrounded by, or how we've learned to navigate life, back in utero. But I often call myself out. There's a very old saying. What's the saying? Actually, it's not a saying. I'm okay with being laughed at. That's important, because for me, you have to have a level of okayness, laughing with yourself from a playful place, so that you can actually be less offended by exposing yourself. i.e., I'm parenting you right now.
All those things resonate so deeply, especially when you mention, and what resonates deeply for me is I have an affinity for the same experience and have navigated those waters as well. But to your point, when you speak about the water becoming thinner, especially when it comes to deep romantic relationships and the desire to create meaningful connection there from the get-go, as opposed to hoping that emotional attachment one day comes together as a deep connection. That to me represents a tremendous degree of insecurity, because as you mentioned earlier, now that's no longer in my control. I'm no longer able to control how this goes, because we're both doing the work. So my ability to project and shame and guilt and put myself on a pedestal is nullified and void.
It was, I mean, this is for me, this is great. 2 months ago, I went through this breakup, so the memories are fresh. In that same space, it was a very respectful, kind separation, and we had a chuckle, and the chuckle was, be careful of how aware you get, because you might become aware enough that you don't want to be in that relationship, and you're not willing to give your ass away anymore to do things. So it can come back and bite you in the ass in the most beautiful way. In the most beautiful way. And that's not easy for the parts of me that were attached. It couldn't be easier for the parts of me that were connected. Because for me, in part, the delineating factor between attachment and or connection for me is I see myself in you. I'm not making you responsible. And so in that moment, as she was acting out that beautiful dance, I got to see myself in her. I got to see one of the parts of me that I celebrate most, which is growing and still growing. I will not put myself in situations or relationships where I'm not able to represent who I am. I won't do it. And if that means it's me and my homie rolling on, then we are rolling on.
I so appreciate the depth of love that represents. I think, as you mentioned earlier, we have a gross misconception of what love really is. Often it's attachment. But I also like the concept, the theory. I have no idea whether or not it's true, but that some of our most uncomfortable emotions, and like you said, the ability from the get-go to represent for you who you are, know that there's mutual agreement on that, I think is an expression of love. I don't think we need necessarily to have this like, oh my God, I'm in love. I feel love all the time. I never feel bad. I feel so good. I love somebody. As infantile as that can seem, it also, in my experience, has formed the aspiration of so many relationships. And by not representing all the vulnerable, afraid, confused, angry parts of myself that come into a relationship, I've noticed it creates such pressure. Fishbowl analogy, it's like you take that fishbowl and you put it in the oven. And over time, it's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter until you have to jump out, because the pressure of not being honest with your partner is so immense that you would rather experience the pain of having to jump out of that fishbowl than to sit with the devastation of never being able to be truly connected as you described. So thank you for sharing that. That's so beautiful in my experience.
Thanks for sharing, brother. Yeah. I won't say it's not scary. It's scary. And I won't not say that there are parts of me that, oh yeah, there are parts of me that wish I hid this or wish I hid that. Maybe I wouldn't be where I am right now. And also in hindsight, who I am today, it was such a powerful lesson to go through that in a very different way, to go through that respectfully and kindly and gently, and to still, she's my homie. I mean, we still hang out, we still eat dinner together, we're still part of each other's lives, even fresh right after the day of breaking up. And that, for me, represents connection, and in the sense of I'm happy and joyful to have her in my life in whatever capacity that is. It doesn't need to be the one thread that I thought I wanted. It can be other ways too. And we can continue to enjoy our friendship. And that has always been then what's grown in my relationships, is the bedrock is friendship. Sometimes when I say friendship, it's interesting, people get triggered, like that's not enough. There is nothing more grand in my book than a true friend. Nothing. And if you're my true friend and my intimate partner, gold. If you're my true friend and not my intimate partner, gold. Because I want to be able to celebrate myself, my life, my direction. And I want to be able to celebrate her life, herself, and her direction. And the last place on earth I want to be in any relationship, and I'll use a very kind of gritty example. I never want to have sex with someone because they feel obligated to have sex with me. Ever. I've done it. Don't want to do it anymore. And I don't want to have relationships in which that obligatory nature is driven so deep, or that expectant nature is driven so deep that we can't really say, you know, babe, I'm not into it tonight. And you say, yeah, I get it. There's some nights I'm not into it either. Cool. You want to watch Netflix? Want a massage? You want to drink water together? Whatever it is. Like, the level of understanding that's there to be, please represent yourself boldly and honestly, and I will do the same. And let's meet there. The paradox to that for me is that place, many people proclaim they want that. That is not an easy place to be. And when all of the waves and the crashing and the splashing and the argument and the shame and blame and all of that, then in my perspective, partnerships become a place that you really start to see yourself. And a lot of people got to run from that, because I need the splashing of the waves on the boat, or the rough waters, to distract me from myself. This relationship is metaphorically calmer. Now I'm being more and more present with myself. In your presence, I can actually see what I'm usually hiding from. And that is a place not many people want to go. In my experience, in my experience of myself, my experience of my relationships, and my experience of thousands of clients.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question that comes to mind when you spoke about hiding. So you mentioned the seas, the splashing of shame, guilt, blame, the arguments can often distract us from ourselves. I know you're a big believer also in the light and shadow side and everything. What is the light in hiding? What is the light in protecting yourself from some of these, like you said, that sense of connection that a lot of people profess to desire? Most are really, really uncomfortable with being present in.
I think there's a beautiful light side to that. The light side for me would be kind of like a hermit crab. It gives you the protection that you need when you need it, until you outgrow it and then need a new shell. Said in another way, that which is protective in the short term becomes detrimental in the long. The challenge often becomes that kind of light side, light side, shadow sides flip-flop, and they're paradoxical, and there's aspects of each other in the other one. So it doesn't make sense, right? So shit doesn't make sense, which frustrates the hell out of the logical mind. So, in that same vein, some of the challenge of the protection is it's a rare bird that decides that the shell has become too tight, that they've outgrown it. This is interesting. Even though they're growing, even though the body, let's just say the metaphorical body is still growing within that shell, even though they're aging, growing, experiencing, it's a rare hermit crab that says, wait a second, the shell that I'm in has become too tight. How do we know that's true? Well, what are the rates of disease? What are the rates of symptoms? What are the rates of back pain? What are the rates of cancer? What are the rates of autoimmune disease? What are the rates of divorce? What are the rates of emotional divorce? Those are all the symptoms of many of us who decide to stay in shells even though we've outgrown them. Because the light side of that shell, in part, is also when we were a smaller hermit crab and we looked out across the beach and there is fucking seagulls everywhere. We said, okay, well, I got to get over there. There's seagulls everywhere. I'm a little hermit crab. I got this little shell. I don't have that big claw yet. All right. I need to figure out behaviors to navigate the seagulls so I can survive. And some of those behaviors included hiding in our shell, hiding aspects of self. As we grow, those aspects are still running the show. We still have little hermit crabs running the show of the big hermit crab who's now stuck in a small shell with a big body. And from my perspective, part of that purpose for those who are willing to self-realize this is going on is the little baby hermit crab is also getting suffocated eventually. And is saying to the big hermit crab who's in the same shell with them and they're all smashed in there, yo, I need your help. I need your attention. I need your acknowledgement. I need you not to leave me like I experienced so many people to leave me. I need you to come and say, you can protect me from these seagulls. And when that starts to occur, then the little crab and the big crab together decide to leave that shell that they've outgrown to go find a new shell to inhabit. But majority of people remain in the same shell and suffocate out those parts of self, the little parts, and pretend they're not there. And continue to enact the behaviors of the little hermit crab that first learned how to traverse that beach with the seagulls in the way that it did to survive, still recapitulating those behaviors to survive. It's a rare bird that thrives. And I don't know if you can thrive without starting to address these roots. So that light side is beautiful. Thank you, little hermit crabs, for having the courage to find ways to protect yourself so I could find you 43 years later and become your friend so we can work together to go in a different direction.
I love this analogy. It's so rich.
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 I like it too. It just sounds like this is good. Where'd this come from?
Jesus,
it's a download. I'm downloading. I'm downloading things. I'm just a vessel, Zavi. Just a vessel.
I understand it.
I'm just a fucking channel. I don't even know who this is anymore.
Ain't that the truth?
My flippantness gets me in a lot of trouble, man.
Well, I think it's trouble that needs to be instigated because it pops up.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
We both have in common the defiant child. And I've certainly been a hermit crab before that hasn't wanted to leave the shell. That's refused at all invitations. And I find it funny that we come on this analogy because it's, we both grew up in the Bay Area. And so the first thing I'm thinking of is like Ocean Beach, right? Hermit crabs, seagulls, and this interplay. And that just tidbit came to mind. But really what it brings up for me, brings to heart, is so many times in receiving your work and listening to you, sharing time with you, communicating with you, I've been challenged in a way that has offered me the opportunity to go, there's a different way to move about this tide. I don't have to get swept up in it every time it comes in. And looking up to you as a mentor, as somebody that I follow, somebody that also teaches me how to lead, which I think is kind of the role of a good mentor. I love that you offer some guidance as to how to navigate the tide and the currents. And I'm curious to hear what is one factor for you that has made the transition personally from that hermit state to being the big crab on the beach. That's really allowed you to cultivate perhaps a greater sense of self-parenting and self-guidance. I don't know about you, but I can certainly say that many times I've looked up to bigger crabs that I thought would help, who left me in the dust. And ultimately, I know where the journey ends, but sometimes there's difficulty of navigating. Cool, I know what I want to do. I know how I want to be, but what are some things I can do to help me feel comfortable enough to move out of the shell?
For my own clarity, are you asking how to feel more comfortable moving out of one shell into another? Like how I do that? Is that summation? I don't know if that's a word, but I like it. Summation. We're making it. Yeah, what a good question. I really like your questions, man. Zadi, you matter because you have good questions.
I certainly feel like it.
Yeah. I mean, you should. Okay. Yeah. For me, looking at how I appreciate what you said. You said something about other big crabs and have left you. For me, I think that rings true. Looking to other big crabs. I don't know that of course I've had the left me experience of that. But something that's been really powerful for my own ability to kind of step out of shells and go try new ones on. And I think it's talked about That's interesting. I think it's talked about a lot. I don't think it's felt about a lot, or really given the depth and credence that it carries. And that is, I like to hang out with big crabs too. So who are those crabs? So Paul Chet, Chris Kresser, J.P. Sears, John McMullen. Those have all been the big crabs that have influenced me most, for sure. They've all been mentors. They've all been friends. They've all have definitely had influence on me. Outside the two biggest crabs, my parents, of course. But back to this observance thing. Because I was gifted with the ability to observe those people, whether it was, I was extra gifted because I got to observe these people in person and interact. I don't want to leave this out. My friend and client, Danny Koster, who was at Apple as an industrial designer for 25 years, getting to hang out with him. Actually, I'm gonna reframe all of that. I think he's been the biggest crab that influenced me the most in terms of the change process. And back to this idea of observance. While I observe my observance, I remember getting to spend a lot of time with Danny. We became friends. We became family. I became the godfather of his daughter. And this person, Danny, has a brilliance that I have not ever experienced. And that brilliance in terms of design and what Apple has done, I think that's probably obvious. He's designed what we're talking on right now. So the level of creativity and brilliance there is astronomical. And something that I learned about observance when I was a kid was my dad. I'm going to tie this all together. My dad would take me all over the place when I was a kid. And he would always ask me, even when I was 3 years old, Ja, when I'm in this meeting, I want you to observe. I want you to observe me. I want you to observe the people speaking. And after the meeting, whether it was a business meeting or argument or whatever it was, Tai Chi, whatever it was, I want to know what you think. I want to know what you observed. So, of course, I want to be a good little boy and meet my dad's needs. So I became very observant because I knew he would always ask me. He wasn't messing around. He would always ask me, what did I see? So this taught me a lot. I became very observant because of some sense of probably wanting to meet my dad's needs. Then my dad would come in and ask me what I observed. Then I would share with my dad what I observed. The beautiful piece is being a child and having an adult who you put way up on a pedestal, a very big crab. Him coming to me and asking me what I observed, the way I downloaded that was, my perspective is important. I'm important. What I see is important. And then I also started to realize, wow, the more observant I am, the more my dad thinks I'm cool. So I grew this grand sense of being extremely observant back to being this very needy child who wanted his dad's attention. Of course I did. And so that grew into hanging out with JP and John and Paul and Chris. But with Danny, what I noticed was I would watch him like a hawk because this dude's a multi-millionaire. It's like crazy. And it's not just because of but just the ability to create that type of energy through money that's an exquisite, interesting thing. And he would take me into his office and show me how he created what he would be creating at Apple and his process. So I would really just observe that process, and that's how I started to create. I took that model. I took Danny's model, the things I liked and didn't like, Paul's model, the things I liked and didn't like, JP's model, the things I liked and didn't like, John's model, the things I liked and didn't like, Chris's model, things I liked and didn't like. So I could create Jator's model. And because I had models then who had modeled that they were successful in their own right, in their own way, sharing their own thoughts, their own philosophy, their own way of doing things, I also then had a sense of safety that I could do it too, because I was observing them doing it, which gave me the keys to my own car to say, I can do this too. So it's a long story about finding people that resonate or reflect some aspect of who you want to be or become, or that you can model yourself after, not to become them. It is a slippery slope, my friend. Please be watchful of modeling to the point of losing yourself. I'll just say that. It's a powerful way to learn to then find your own expression, so that you can step out of your shell to go and share your work or your world or whatever it may be.
You make a beautiful point, based on what I heard you say, being picking different pieces of what resonates from each and every friend, mentor, guru, if you go that route, and what doesn't resonate. Would you say that there's a certain amount of shame and guilt that goes into our learning process, such that sometimes when we take on somebody else's wisdom, you might feel a sense of shame and guilt around not adopting everything, not modeling perfectly?
Yeah. I mean, for me, most of that would be driven through, if you're modeling, which I think in all ways we do to some regard, and eventually grow out of that shell too. If you're modeling from the place of that person's so high up on a pedestal that you're still looking for your metaphoric dad or your metaphoric mommy, you will model to the point of completely copying them down to their quirks, the way they dress, their quirks, their speech, their hand positioning. You will model to that degree if a part of you is needy enough for that person to be your dad or your mommy, because you're still in some regard lost. You still haven't found yourself yet. So in an interesting way, it's like getting lost in someone else to eventually find yourself. My experience has been that those that engage in that long term and even short term will not be successful. And my guess would be, my guess would be because that stands out so vibrantly. Why would I go to the copy when I could go to the main source? If you're just regurgitating and copying what somebody else does, and you don't have you in it, it to me, it represents a grand loss of self to get attention. And I mean, we see this all. I mean, you're a CHEK practitioner. If you know, this is not a criticism. It's what human beings do. If I had a nickel for every time I saw a CHEK practitioner stacking rocks, I'd be rich. That's not a criticism. And I hope some people got triggered and sent me some mean messages. It's not a criticism, but it is an invitation to question what's your creativity? What's your way of doing it differently? What's your expression in life? What's your painted shell? You know, how is it painted differently? And I think it's a beautiful thing to model to that degree for a time, to find your own way. And I understand it because I've been in it. I've been there too. I remember I used to think I literally, I remember the first time I met Paul, like 14 years ago, when I walked into his office, I was literally thinking, I was like, oh my God. When I flash back, I was in there like, if he would have told me to fucking smoke tar, I would have smoked tar. I'd be like, yeah, I'll smoke some tar. Hell yeah, I'll smoke some tar. I was so needy of what I thought he had. And that's beautiful. And I'm really exuberantly happy that I met some other teachers along the way that taught me some things about questioning myself and getting curious about stuff and helping me carve my own complete path that is a mix of all of them and has completely Jator's own spin on it.
Thank you again for something that hits home. Something I can say that was brought up by what you said about painting your own shell is this idea that if my shell is perhaps a different shade than the other big crabs that I want to roll with, but somehow by rolling with them, I'll turn the color of my shell to match it. And I think perhaps the shadow side of discovering what you're offering is there's probably going to be some loneliness and frustration that one must confront and saying, I love you all. Thank you for what you've taught me. But it's time for me to go grow into my biggest shell. And it's a different color than yours. I'm going to walk a different way. That's
well said.
Super scary.
I'd agree. Very scary. And it's why I think the crabs I eventually sought out were crabs that said this to me: take what you learn and find your own expression. That to me is a teacher I always want to be around. Not that they're my teacher, but a person that says, take what you learned, find your own way. Never do your best not to put me on a pedestal. Do your best to become my brother. Because as long as you put me on a pedestal, we'll never know each other.
I heard you say that those who have impacted you most have offered that. The deepest connection that you could offer them is a connection with yourself, an embodiment of what you really know to be true, and that putting them on a pedestal prevents connection.
Mm.
And even maybe purposefully, you know, you're in love with the ideas of people, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with the purposefully. Back to what you said earlier, it's if I'm afraid to be a different shade than you are, what if you don't like me if I change my shade? What if you don't like me if I eat different than you do? What if you don't like me that I think white rice isn't a poison and you do? It's scary. It's scary to break out. Many people, or very few people, have broken out of the self-programmed values that they learned in family of origin. Very few people break out of that. And so if you learn to self-program with other people's value sets, and you haven't challenged and brushed deeply that individuation process, you will continue to look for other people's values to validate yourself with, which then you'll become extremely afraid to become a different shell color. Because then I'm not part of the family. We're not even a hermit crab anymore. What if I'm a seagull now? Will we still be friends? Will you still love me? Will you still accept me? Will you still invite me over to your house?
I love that for this reason that you presented around the fear of not being accepted when you show your true colors. Something I've struggled with, I've been challenged by, and I've gone through more friendships and relationships as a result of changing than I could possibly count. Something that you've said before, in some of your videos, one comes to mind, is you will lose people on the path. And I don't even know if I have a question other than
oh shit. I mean, yeah, I remember that it's one that stands out quite frequently to me. And I think it was in my very unpopular, most popular video. It it really strikes. It really, really strikes, because at least for me it does. Because there's, at least in my experience, there's so much intertwining of expectation, culture, obligation, experience, value, right and wrong. There's so much intertwining between humans and how we kind of interact with each other. One of the greatest intertwines, which I see, that this usually triggers the shit out of people, so this will be fun, is there's an idea that because I take you means I care about you. It's a slippery one. And there's a fine line between taking, caring, and enabling. And many of us have been taught that we matter by caring or rescuing others. And so we get our needs met through rescuing. We get our needs met by caring. I'm a good person. I'll take care of you. And don't forget your jacket. Get your socks. Did you eat your vegetables today? Put your jacket on. Parenting is the language I would use, which triggers people too. parenting everyone around you because you're arrogant and self-righteous enough to know how other people should live their lives. That when you start to break out of that, when you start to not need other people to parent you, when you start to not need other people to caretake for you, when you start to not need other people to protect you, people start to lose their shit because they no longer know how to be in your presence because they don't know what to do anymore. What do I do if I'm not taking care of you? I'll give you a fun example. My mom, to this day, will literally ask me if I ate my vegetables. And I laugh and I smile. Inside, the self-righteous, arrogant part of me says, do you know who the fuck I am? And the little boy in me says, oh, that's sweet. And then the coach in me says, my mom still hasn't learned that she matters, even if she's not playing the role of my mom. And so my mom, in part, this is all projection. She might have a slightly different story. My mom, in part, still fulfills her life by taking care of others, by worrying about others, by feeling guilty about others, all about other people, so she can feel some sense of purpose in her own life and that she matters. This isn't a story about my mom. This is a story about all of us. And when you start to swim out of that story, here's what you're going to hear. You're weird. You're cold. You're disconnected. You're not loving. You're an asshole. You're selfish. You only think about yourself. And on and on and on. That change in and of itself for most people, you'll probably shed somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 90% of the people in your life. Because most relationships, whether they're intimate or otherwise, including parents, are extremely based on codependency and emotional neediness. And as you become independent and interdependent, and people start to lose their purpose in your presence, they will fight tooth and nail to get their purpose back, which is, I'm going to fucking parent you. Or it's going to be so painful for me, I'm going to parent you by leaving you. And so my experience is that your circle will get smaller and smaller, and you'll eventually start to meet other people who are on this same path, or at least you'll start to meet, it's not like you'll meet, on this plane, someone that's right where you are, but you will start to meet, which has been my personal experience, you will start to co-create more curious friendships. Well, let's talk about that. That's really interesting. I never thought about that. Then you start to open up dialogue, and whether we agree or disagree is irrelevant. For me, it's, wow, we get to have dialogue about it, rather than shaming and blaming back into obligation and expectation, and that being the driving force of why we're in anything together.
I love this. These are great. I heard you say that there's a certain degree of caretaking that feeds our need for other people to meet our needs. Releasing that caretaking process, you said, sheds about 70 to 90% likely in your experience with your friend group. Maybe people who are outside of your friend group as well, relationships. If you date more than one person, perhaps, right? My question becomes now, in order for real connection to happen in a relationship, and it's a little bit rhetorical, but I'm going to ask it anyway, would you say that there has to be a certain degree of emotional maturity, as you mentioned, with two folks who come together, who can start to become curious, interested, and open to exploring each other's, as you described it, fishbowls?
Yeah, I would say a prereq is definitely some level of emotional maturity, for sure. And sometimes that prereq is emotional immaturity. It's kind of like, you know, we often learn by having the experience that we don't want to have. So the way I see a lot of things is it's like this, it's a process. It's always shifting and changing. And I don't see anything that is unnecessary. If it's here, it's necessary from my perspective. And so emotional immaturity would be necessary to learn the consequences of emotional immaturity, to maybe then invite in the consciousness to start working on emotional maturity. It's like suffering is important in the sense that it invites in a different consciousness. If the suffering wasn't there, it would be hard to know what you were moving out of. You wouldn't have this relative experience. So this suffering is like an invitation for you to say, what's the consciousness to bring me in a different direction? So if emotional immaturity is suffering, then emotional immaturity might be moving out of that or giving purpose to the suffering to find emotional maturity and intimacy. And I think a lot of people think that intimacy is sex. Maybe intimacy is a part of sex. In my experience, most people use sex for control, manipulation, and seduction. It's a shadow side that not many people see, at least in my arrogant opinion. And so for me, intimacy is, besides into me I see, is putting down my sword and shield and back all the way full circle to our beginning, where you asked me this question about why I express the way I express. I'm attempting to become intimate with myself by not inhibiting my expression of emotion and feeling. The more intimate I can become with myself, the more I can start to see these shadow aspects or these parts of self that I don't want to see, or I don't want to see that I've seduced people, manipulated people, contorted, done all that shit. I don't want to see it. Even if it's not overt. Trust me when I say all of you are doing it. It's just you're in a fishbowl. For me, I want to start to grow that intimacy with my fishbowl or my fish water, because the more I can do that and I start to understand and acknowledge the width and breadth of myself in all of this, good, bad, ugly. If I can offer those aspects of self a higher amount of compassion and understanding over time, what happens? I got an email the other day from a client that said, "I hate you, Jator." And I said, fucking A, thank you for sharing your truth. Why do you hate me? What's wrong? What did I do wrong? I got to fix it. Or I have a client that said, I'm super pissed off at you. You missed this appointment. You abandoned me. You're a jerk. This is like live, like this, going off. And I could say, how does it feel to be heard? And when do you remember not being heard? And for me, what that represents is, I know that I hate you, Jator, is, yeah, I've been there. I know that I'm angry at you. You didn't show up for an appointment. Yep, been there too. I know that, oh, you cheated on me. Yep, know that too. You dropped the ball, didn't follow through. Yep, know that too. And I've worked to have compassion for those parts. And I'm not saying I have compassion for all of those parts, but it's a work in progress. Do I still get triggered? Of course I do. And my propensity for more grace toward myself and other is continuing to expand and grow. For me, it's grace and allowance. Again, back to that word love. That word, I think, is extremely misunderstood. My question to most people who use that word would be, show me something here that isn't that. That would be my question.
There's a part of me that comes up with what you say. Becomes kind of confused as to, okay, cool. I can be completely honest with myself, be honest with other people. Yet at the same time, I may become hurt or offended when people are completely honest and true to themselves with me. Which I think begs the question again, okay, cool. Are some of these double standards really forms of attachment rather than true connection? So do you have kind of any words of wisdom for the part of me, the part of somebody listening, who may say, yeah, I'd love to be honest and represent for my truth and really connect to each and every person that comes my way, but I don't want to have that other person do the same to me.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think it's pretty simple.
Good.
I mean, essentially what I heard you say is, there's a part of you that doesn't want to be truthful and honest. And when that part of you shows up in another person, that's the trigger. I'd also say that okay, so these are concepts and they're fucking challenging. So one of the contextual pieces of this concept is getting to a place, not in your head, but in your heart, which is a jump. And that is slowly over time realizing in your heart that you're not responsible for how other people experience you. As long as you feel a sense of responsibility and ownership about how other people experience you, you have to get triggered. You have to go into proving and defending, and it has to be, you have to reactively prove and defend, whether you shut it out and keep it inside or you overtly express it. Someone else's truth is someone else's truth. It's not yours to own. So I think one of the kind of grassroots basics of this is tell me something shitty about me, Zavi.
I would say one of my experiences that the depth of what you offer is really inconvenient to what I want.
Zavi, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience of me. Now here's the real seduction. Tell me something great about me.
Good. I feel that I can express anything that comes up in my heart. And although there's personal apprehension as to being vulnerable, I know that it will be welcomed and accepted when I share it with you and heard. I'll feel heard.
Thank you. Thank you again for sharing your experience of me. The piece of sharing your experience of me can become very heady, and it often does. People just regurgitate it. That sentence has to come from feeling, emotion, and sensation. That sentence has to come from your heart. If it comes from your head, you will always be triggered by how other people experience you, because it's essentially just a deflection. Saying that from your heart is really saying, thank you for seeing yourself in me as I see myself in you. And there's a great game, and I've played this game a tremendous amount over the years, which I think has taught me a lot about this, because it's the experience of it. You sit down with a group. It could be a group of people or one-on-one. Let's just say it's a group. Or me and you. I am the projector, you're the receiver. My job is to tell you one thing I don't like about you, one thing I like about you. Here's the meat and potatoes of this game, which most people don't do. This is not surface level bullshit. This is, I want to hurt you. I want to up the ante in this game as high as I can. Because you got to get used to people projecting shit onto you. It's like, do you think guys in the NHL and NFL didn't practice to get there? Right? You're just seeing someone that's done a lot of practice to get to a place where I can navigate that easier. And I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying I've spent a lot of time doing this. So most people will play that game and still inhibit what they're saying. They won't take the knife out and fucking stab you because they're afraid. That's something to notice. I'm afraid to speak my truth, even when I'm playing this game, that the game is asking me to speak my truth and with a sharp knife, cut you fucking open. Because I still feel some sense of responsibility of how you're going to experience it. On the flip side, the good stuff, some people might feel apprehension about that too. Some people might not. But either way, you're trying to seduce the person as hard as you can with negativity or positivity projected onto them. That would be my job. Your job would be to observe yourself as that's happening and not respond. Your job is to just let it land and let the experience happen and let yourself take on what you take on and give it back to the person without word, just in your, that's their experience. And they're welcome to their experience. After I say the heinous thing about you, directly after I say it, I pause, and then I take it back by saying, and this is what it means about me. This is how I see myself in my projection. Because all I'm doing is projecting me onto you. Same thing with the beautiful one. After you say it, then you own it and take it back as a part of self. And it's not literal, because I might say, well, I don't literally do that. Yeah, we're not talking about literal. So you go to, okay, what does that mean then? What does that action that you see him doing mean? And then that's how you find what it means about you, right? It's more like a painting rather than Zavi picks his nose and that's disgusting. I don't pick my nose. Okay, what does pecking your nose represent to you? Okay, then we can go there and then you can find a deeper meaning, right? Play that game as often as you can. That's the practice field. So that when you get into the game, you have a higher degree of skill navigating, not taking ownership of how other people experience you in their deepest truths. I want to hear your truth. I wanted to hear my ex's truth, even though it was like, whew, she didn't hurt me. Her truth didn't hurt me. My expectations, my stories, my feelings, my inner child, my metaphoric mom, my future tripping, all of that is what hurt me. She had nothing to do with it.
Oh. That degree of ownership is really super, super powerful. And I love that about what you're sharing. But even as we did that exercise, I noticed a part of me that's like,
Totally. It's not easy.
It's not. And that's one of the beautiful things about, at least the way I experience your work and what you have coached me on, is none of this is easy. I didn't stop pretending to be my mother's imaginary husband the next day.
Yeah, totally.
Tried. But that being said,
oh shit, yeah.
it took a little while to just become aware of it, and it's still something that comes up. It's something I voice, something that I struggle with. And I think one thing that I'd love to reflect to the listeners, at least in the work that I've done, is cool. This is a really scary thing to do, to be completely honest, even with yourself, if you were to play this game internally. But that being said, even after we've done the exercise and you've just explained a little bit about how we navigate that, there's a sense of ease, no longer this hypervigilance of what's going on within, because I'm no longer trying to change it, no longer trying to cover it up, put it to bed, give it a pacifier. And that freedom, I think, is really, really, really needed. Who knows if people will take the bait? But I know that as you and I have done our own work, and you've done far more than I have, there's a great sense of, oh, cool, I can be honest with myself now, and I'm still going to be afraid of that. But I know it's okay. I can. So I really appreciate that drill, that exercise, something I'll use in my practice, something that I'd like to copy verbatim.
Please do. I have a YouTube video on it where I'm sitting there with two Hulks and I'm talking to the Hulk, and yeah, I didn't make that up. I got that from John McMullen.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
It's a beast. Me and JP play it all the time. Something you'll like. We go fucking at each other too. Good stuff.
Therein lies, in my experience, what is a true connection.
Yeah.
I've had more shit moments with my very close friends than I've had great moments. That gives it substance, right? It's no longer, oh my God, this is so fun. We never get mad at each other, and I'm happy all the time.
Yeah, not my cup of tea. Yeah.
So on this note, as we kind of tie things together, is there any message that you would really like to share with the listeners that resonates for you right where we are? Middle of COVID, here in the United States, everyone's losing it. Over there in Denmark, it sounds a whole lot better. What message do you have for your brothers and sisters state-bound who are in the middle of it?
Yeah. It's a challenging message. Yep, it's challenging. At least it feels challenging. What we're all feeling right now around COVID and quarantine and the medical system and politics and different people in those worlds and agenda, racism and child trafficking, and my mind is just blown with the amount of. If a spaceship is over my house tomorrow, I won't be surprised. I'll be like, this is par for the course. The message is, consider this. Every single aspect that you're feeling from a sensation place, from a feeling place, and an emotional place right now has always been there. What this situation is doing is allowing it to come up and be seen. Most of us numb this stuff out all the time. And right now, there's not many places to run from experiencing yourself and your real pain. It seems like it's COVID. It seems like it's quarantine. It seems like it's politics. It seems like it's Trump. It seems like it's Biden. It seems. My truth is, you and I are being deeply exposed to what's going on inside of us at all times. We just numb it out. I mean, we could just take the very simple piece of what we've chatted on a lot of today. Isn't it fascinating, the use of masks and how that might represent the lack of use of your own voice for your entire life? Makes me mad.
As these things come up, and as a lot of what you presented is deep stuff coming up, quarreled with, tangled with, fought with, accepted, loved, heard. I want to thank you for having the courage to be the rainbow crab amongst the monotony.
Mm.
replication,
Mm.
to let your truth fly free and to be completely honest about that. Because rare is the bird, right? Rare is the bird that becomes full in their wingspan and their expression. And one thing that I know to be true in my experience is a lot of the people we learn from in any circle, whether you're a marine biologist or you're an ADAPT practitioner or a cashier, a lot of the people that we learn from have the best intentions, but don't really know us. Don't take the time to get to know us. And that is one thing that stands out so potently and beautifully to me about the work that you share, the work you offer, and the message that you've presented here today. There's no need to deny or deflect or even comb over some of these most vulnerable aspects of ourselves. There's a deep willingness to connect and know that part of ourselves, because ultimately, it may lead us where we want to go, it may not. But as you mentioned, I don't want to be parented, I want to be heard. And that perspective, the depth of wisdom within that, I hope is something that every listener of this can take with them. I know I will myself, because I have a lot of work to do. But I want to thank you for sharing all these things today. And as always, I'm humbled to be able to connect on this level.
Yeah. Thank you for your words. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for our friendship, all the way back to that HLC one online that we did that was just me and you the whole time, which I was like, are you fucking kidding me right now? This dude is the fucking luckiest person on the planet. I was like, how did he get this lucky? And one person in the class. That was so awesome. I was like, I wish I had that. Jesus Christ. But I think what I'd like to take a moment to also celebrate is I'm often blown away, celebratory. I think there's a part of me that's jealous. My experience of you and a few other young, I like to call them gray Jedis, who are around in our circle right now. I'm in awe, and I'm in awe at where you all are at in my eyes at a younger age, and the jealousy probably comes like, oh man, I started at 24. How come they started at 21? The little boy in me, but the brother in me, maybe the older crab in me, steps back and says, and I can't wait to see what you guys do.
Means the world. Pumps my ego balloon up to the max.
That's what I'm here for, man.
Life pops it. But I can honestly say that every one of those people that I think you may be mentioning, all of our conversations has always spoken of you in the highest regard, and looks up to you tremendously. And I myself have certainly put you on a pedestal in many ways.
Can I share a story?
Yeah.
Can I just blatantly cut you off and share a story because I'm such an arrogant jerk? I think this story speaks volumes for this connection, I think. So I met JP, I don't know, 13 years ago now, something like that. And I sought JP out to be my mentor and to coach with and do work with. I was really fascinated by my experience of him. And over the years, we became really close friends. And when I first met him, I used to refer to him as Doc Samson. Doc Samson is the doctor of Marvel. He works with like Bruce Banner and all these guys. And also I used to refer to him as Yoda, as a Jedi. It's like he's a fucking Jedi master. And I remember, basically sitting in your chair and JP sitting in my chair. And I was just like, man, you're a fucking Jedi, man. And he was like, yeah. He's like, I get it. And you're seeing yourself in me, Jator. You're seeing yourself in me. And I was like, yeah. Whatever you're talking about. Fast forward 7 years later, I'm teaching for the CHEK Institute. I'm teaching HLC 2. And at the end of the class, we're all sharing, and every single one of them said, who are you? You're a fucking Jedi master. And I called JP after that class, and he said, remember what I told you, I shared with you 7 years ago. And I was just like, fuck. But for me, it's such a powerful story of what we get to see in each other. I get to see the Jedi in you. You get to see the Jedi in me, and I really mean that. And there's a couple other of you out there that I don't want to say names because I feel like I'll miss someone, and then I'll feel shitty for not taking care of everyone. But I will say that there is a group of just like cool young men that are fucking game changers and give me hope for what's coming next, man. And you're definitely one of those. Honored to know you, brother.
As aspects of me learn to receive that and really know that, I thank you for, in a way, helping me to work through those things so I can receive your love.
Awesome, brother. Awesome.
To plug your amazing efforts to finish this off, Restore 60, we have enrollment coming soon, or enrollment is open. Is that right?
Enrollment is a new word. August 3rd is enrollment opens. Starting date is August 11th. I'm super excited. I think it's going to be a nice group. It's a fun ride for me. I think it's some of the most fun that I have right now. And challenging. Whew. It is challenging navigating anywhere from 20 to 60 people and all of their expectations, and it's a whole other level of the game of going there. And the first one I did, I think there was 66 people, and doing one-on-one coaching in front of 66 people was a game changer for me. Because in my style of coaching, like I have zero clue what's going to happen and what's going to occur. Anything can fucking go. Oh shit! It's a beast, man.
Wow. Where can people find you on social media?
Explore with Jator is my handle for Instagram. Jator Pierre, WeHLC is Facebook. My main website now is Explore with Jator. That's where you can find the link to basically all my stuff. All things Jator. That's how important I am. Yeah. Twitter, I think, is Jator at 23.
I can attest to the Twitter, by the way. When you when you offer the limitation of 140 characters for your wisdom, there's no room to fuck around.
There isn't. It's sharp as a knife in there. It's sharp as a knife.
My friend, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for riding with me as I figure out what I'm doing.
Awesome.
I can barely get Zoom to work.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to share your heart with us. Thank you for your vulnerability, for your courage, for the ability to communicate such subtle intricacies of the heart, such a detail. And thank you for helping me to feel heard and seen. I hope that I've helped you to feel heard and seen. And for anyone who's willing to hear and see themselves, Restore 60, August 3rd. Coming.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for your experience.